Hello and welcome to The Link. I'm Joanie Sutter. The Link is a program all about linking you with the resources in your community. Connecting people through storytelling is what today's guest does and does really well. Annalisa Russell-Smith is an independent storyteller with a news photojournalist's eye, specializing in telling real-life stories for nonprofits and small businesses about things that are hard to explain is her specialty. Today, we'll get an inside look at the story of Annalisa. Annalisa, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I have to say that your work is beautiful, and for those of you at home that are watching this, you're going to see what I mean in a little bit, but we're going to find out a little bit about you first. How did you begin? What was the initial attraction to this field for you?
Well, I was working in New Britain, actually, for the local paper there. And as a staff photojournalist, you get sent to all kinds of, events in the community, everything from high school sports to, to unveilings. But the things that really started to sort of pull me in were the things that were really difficult, like I was sent one day to the Salvation Army, to the shelter. Mm-hmm. Because it was starting to get cold, and they would open the shelter to people late in the evening. And so before the high school football game on a Friday evening, one day I was sent there, and I didn't know what to do because it was really hard. How do you strike up a conversation with this is a men's shelter, with people who are homeless when you're on your way to a game? And you just need to stop by because the editor's asked you to get a couple of shots because the shelter's about to open. I wanted to know, what the story was behind, the people who were waiting there in the cold to get in for, something nice and warm to eat. And so that's where it started. I started going back when I wasn't scheduled to go, and I wanted to talk to people and see, what their story was. And that's really where it started. And so that experience made me want to write about the Salvation Army shelter. That's where it started. And so I did, and it was the reaction to the story. I wrote it on my own time, and I figured, because it was long, that the editor would cut it, to something, that would fit. But after they read it, and I'd taken photographs, and I did some short videos with it, and I wasn't doing video at the time at all. This is about 5 or 6 years ago. And so I did a quick video with my iPhone, little profiles of some of the guys that I interviewed for the story. And the editor said, we're going to run this on 3 days. This is just the kind of story which small newspapers just don't have the resources for anymore. So that made me feel really good, but even more than that, it felt really good to have attention brought to something that I felt was a story that people didn't hear about. I got a few letters afterwards, and several people stopped me on the street because I was always out, somewhere working with my camera. One fellow stopped me, and he told me that he was really taken by the story simply because he hadn't really given any thought to what happens to people at night if they are homeless, especially when it gets cold. But the letter that came that really got me was from a local lawyer who said, I will never pass a person who is homeless on the street ever again without even acknowledging that they're there. Because it's so easy, just, you see someone and you pass by, it's much easier, it's much more comfortable just sort of maybe just to give them a quick glance and sort of, scurry by. But he said, I will never do that again because of that story. Because all of a sudden the people that were homeless had a voice. Mm-hmm. And so that's where it started. I thought to myself, I have to find a way to do more of this. And so
that was 6 years ago. Is that something that was always innately in you, wanting to tell these stories?
Yeah, I think I've always been drawn to the, I don't know what you want to call it, whether it's, the underdog story. I would always be rooting for for the, you know, someone who, you know, you really, your heart went out to, you know, or I was the one who brought home the injured bird or the injured animal, you know, that kind of thing. That was where, you know, where my heartstrings were pulled, if you like. But this wasn't about, you know, pulling heartstrings. This was about finding a way to really draw attention to things that people should be looking at rather than just passing them by or sweeping them under the carpet.
So how does that turn into a business then? Because some of the video that we're going to show you is about your business. A lot of your business is with nonprofit organizations.
Right.
And so you're helping nonprofit organizations really show people what they do.
Right.
You know, it's one thing to read it and to say, okay, I know that the Salvation Army, we'll use them as an example, they provide these services, you know, A, B, C, D. But the A, B, C, D impact individuals very much like us.
Right.
And so when you can relate to that individual and those services, maybe there will be a donation to the organization that wouldn't ordinarily be there.
Yeah, and I think that's at first I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I didn't really know exactly what my business was going to look like. And I can tell you that, you know, the kind of storytelling that I do, I'm not thinking about how much money I can make from something. I'm thinking about how can I tell the best story, you know, how can I find a way to explain to people who are on the outside of this organization why it is that it's so important that this organization exists. And so from a non-profit standpoint, most non-profits start because there's a real need for something. There's something that's missing. So whether it's domestic violence or whether it's mental health or homelessness or any number of things that are really difficult things to sort of tackle in society, those are the things where you know, if you find a way to be able to connect people with the story, a door opens or a light bulb goes off, and someone like the fellow who wrote to me and said, I will never pass a homeless person on the street ever again. That story, by the way, was called Serving the Invisible. So he said, I will never pass by them as though they were invisible ever again. What would he do? He would talk to them, offer to buy them a cup of coffee, maybe give them money ask if they needed help. So those things might seem really small, but if everybody did that, you could just say hello. Just having dignity is something that is lost very often when you experience homelessness. That's something that has been brought home to me by the work that I do. And so many people are so close to being homeless themselves because the economy has not been really very supportive for so many people. And so when you think that that could be me, I think, you know, it gets to be rather scary. It's the same with mental health. Ray Gorman, who is president and CEO of CMHA, he actually says in the film that I made for them that, you know, people find it scary to think that they may one day need some sort of mental health service of any description. And it's very common. Yeah, it really is. And people are afraid to come forward and say, I think I might need some help with this. And so I think fear prevents us from doing so many things. And I think putting a human face on an issue makes it that much easier to understand. And so how did the video component come in? So you're writing stories firstly, and then you went into really the connected piece, the ability to make the connection between society and what you're seeing or the story that you were writing about. And then the video piece came in. Did you find that to be an easy transition? Well, I have to say that I see stories all the time. I see them everywhere, but I see them in my head like you would see a film. And so if I see something that I think is really interesting, and I'll start to imagine how I would tell that story, it starts in my head, and I'm seeing like a reel, I guess you would call it. And this has happened since I was really very small, and I used to tell stories to my teddy bear when I was really young, and then I would turn around on the bus and I'd be talking to the people on the bus. My mum will tell you this, that, you know, the stories that I would gather sort of material, and then I would turn it into, you know, an expanded version of the story that I might get an idea for on the bus, talking to the man behind after my mum had been shopping for some things, and I would be telling him all about what my mum had been buying, but also asking him what he had in those bags, you know.
So it sounds like you're actually, if I'm going to use the term working, because you are in a business, your gift, you're really working your gift.
Yeah, and I didn't really see it as such because I thought everybody did that. You know, when you do something that you really enjoy, you think, well, it's not that special because everybody can do it. And I realize now that isn't the case.
Not to the level that you do it.
Right, and I think you sort of build on your skills. And what I really love about it is that you never know when you're dealing with real life what's going to happen. And I explain to my clients, you know, that, and actually usually they are the ones telling me, you know, I don't know what you're going to get because, you know, this person, you know, they're non-verbal, for example. That's one thing that I've had a lot of experience with, people who perhaps can't speak in the way that we think. But I grew up in a household full of different languages, and so finding a way to communicate with people, I find, and again, it's something you think that everybody can do. I find it, I don't think I don't consider it a gift, but you just have to work at finding a way to communicate with people, whatever their level. So
I think it's an underdeveloped instinct that we have.
Yeah.
And when something, you know, yours is more highly developed,
Right.
and if you don't have to develop it, you don't.
Right.
Or you don't think there's a need to develop it. But the unspoken word, just the energy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you meet someone, you don't even have to say anything.
Right.
You already know that energy, very much like animals, right?
Oh yeah, and animals. That's another thing. Yeah, dogs. It was always a bit of a joke that, you know, I'm friends with every dog that walks by, and it seems to be the case.
I saw that on your website, that they always come over to say hello.
Yeah, honestly, you know, I don't know how that works. I must have been a dog in another life, or maybe I will be one. I don't know, but it's just really interesting how children and animals, they really do know, and I think that, like you were saying, the energy is something which is recognizable.
Oh yeah, felt, yes.
And so for people who are non-verbal, you know, they have, generally speaking, I think, very highly developed skills that for those of us who can speak in, you know, in words that you can hear, I think it's something, like you said, you know, we haven't had to develop those skills, those non-verbal skills, that they have. And so so when you work with people, and, you know, if I'm explaining to my client that this is, you know, real life, I don't really know exactly what I'm going to get. I can have a plan for how to tell a story because I meet with my clients first and we discuss, you know, what the possibilities are or what they're looking for, or, you know, who the audience is, all the things that you would think about, you know, the reasons why something needs to be made, you know, why a film would need to be made. Then, you know, things happen and you don't always end up with what you think you're going to get, but that's the beauty of it as well.
That is the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And when you conduct an interview, I find this, and I'm sure you do too, many times I will have a set script, but what comes out of that interview is what needed to come out.
Right.
And so you don't want to squash that. That's the jewel in there, you know.
Yeah.
And before we continue with some more of the interview, I want to show you at home some of Annalisa's work so you can understand more about what we're talking about.
Need in our community by providing comprehensive programs and services for individuals and their families. Delilah is 26 years old and a member of the board at CMHA's Social Club in New Britain.
It's been the difference for me between being sick and being hospitalized, or just being independent and fairly well. It's something you can't deal with on your own.
Finding the right tree, along with Delilah and some friends from the CMHA Social Club, went to give testimony at the
One thing about the drugs that is not prejudice. He likes them big, he likes them tall, he likes them white, he likes them black, Chinese. Vietnamese, Puerto Rican, poor, rich. He takes you
If
how
people
you are.
stay in
He
treatment,
will
they
love
do
you.
very, very, very well.
Comes to services provided by the Prudence Crandall Centre to those affected by domestic violence. Nilda Cruz is the shelter manager who helps families and individuals as they arrive and tries to give them some comfort and a friendly face to talk to in such difficult circumstances.
Everything that's supposed to be important to her.
There are affordable transitional and permanent housing programs, some of the first in the country. Affordable safe housing offers independence to survivors and is critical in breaking the cycle of abuse.
We've been working with victims of domestic violence for 40 years at Prudence Crandall Centre.
Independent life. What she really appreciates is that the Prudence Crandall Centre gave her the tools to save her own life. Stepping into Sean's pianos in West Hartford is like stepping into a musical time machine. One moment you're in the early 20th century playing a beautifully restored Steinway or Mason Hamlin. And the next, you're in the 21st century playing a brand new, state-of-the-art Rittmuller or Pearl River piano. The wizard behind all of this is Sean Hoare, master craftsman, artist, engineer, and successful entrepreneur whose life's passion lies with the piano and the magical marriage of wood and metal found in an instrument that is so easy to take for granted. So why would someone with such a passion for vintage pianos be interested in selling new ones?
The handmade pianos is quite special, but it's not for everyone. And most people don't come in looking for.
Annalisa, the power behind that video work is why we called you to be here today and to interview you, because you have to have an innate sense to be able to pick up on those nuances to make it work and make it be a piece that's feeling for other people to want to take an action, whether that be a donation to the organization, joining the organization as a volunteer, utilizing the organization with someone who's in need. And there has to be a safety and a trust level that goes into that. I mean, these are powerful stories about real people. And so does that come up in your work where an organization will say, how are you going to depict our people?
Yeah, I think for sure it does, because most people are not involved in making films, and I do call the work that I do, that they are films or documentary films, because anybody can make a video, because we all have video cameras in our pockets. It's easy. But I think the idea that how do you tell a story? How do you develop something that it's out of ether, really? How do you do that? And I think for the first thing I would say is that I would sit down as one human being with another. That's the first thing. I'm not thinking about how I can trick somebody into giving me an answer to a question that's going to be a sensational answer that would, perhaps illustrate a point.
Yeah, the money shot.
Exactly, yeah, that's exactly it. What I'm looking for as I'm working with any organisation are those human connections, and you can't fabricate those. You have to have something whereby somebody trusts you right away. And I think when you gather a body of work, that's one way that people can see for themselves. Right. But the long and the short of it is, when you actually sit down with a person, or you sit with somebody, because most people don't spend their lives on camera, you have to somehow put them at ease. And so, when you're just talking to someone and you're finding some kind of common ground, and then, you're talking with them about things that are often very difficult for them to talk about. They want to. You have to, you can't force somebody to talk to you about something they don't want to discuss. That's not something that would ever sort of enter, into anything that I would do. But I think the most important thing is that people do feel comfortable enough and they trust you, and that might happen in 10 seconds or 30 seconds. It's not something really I could really, describe. It's just something that happens, but I think it's all down to the kind of person that you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with the video component that came in from the photography and the writing, which I know you still do photography, was that video component something that you really enjoy doing?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what happened. I fell in love with one day with video. That's what happened. The medium was something which, it's just like, oh, right, now I've started this, what do I do? It's like opening Pandora's box.
And you edit.
Yeah, I do everything.
And you write music. So you really write the story, you find the story many times, write the story, shoot the story, edit the story, and you do some musical composition sometimes if it's needed, a selection of music, because you can't use copyrighted music on these pieces.
Right, unless you pay.
Unless you pay, which is quite a bit.
Right.
And so you do that as well. So you're providing the whole feeling, because you have to have the right music to go with the piece.
Yeah, and that's really what drove me to sort of writing a lot of my own things. That's a more sort of recent thing. In the last sort of year and a half, I've been writing my own soundtracks. Because I collect sound wherever I go. I have a field recorder and I do collect sounds because you never know when you're going to need something. But about the video component, when I fell in love with it, it was the editor of the paper sent me out to a fire one day and he said, oh, and by the way, could you just shoot a little bit of video while you're at the scene, send it back to the newsroom? And I thought, oh God, how am I going to do that? So I did it with my iPhone and I emailed it back. And it was literally a minute, as the building was engulfing in flames. And so that's what they needed. It was breaking news. So after that, I just started to learn on my own. I belong to the National Press Photographers Association. Actually, I'm regional chair,
for New England.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something, it was an elected position I took over in January. And, video is something that not everybody does. I understand that not everybody wants to do, but it's one of those sort of necessities these days, especially in a newspaper or a print environment, where people have to learn or have to know how to do, even basic, not just shooting, but editing too. And it's intimidating for people. A lot of journalists, I've had people from some, national newspapers actually back at home in England who've said to me, oh, well, I know that you do video, Annalisa, my editor's given me a camera and I have to, ask the Prime Minister at the end of an interview, can I just get 30 seconds, sir? And it's, it's a terrible, so the National Press Photographers Association is the organisation that really gave me the tools that I needed to be able to do video really well. And I consider it to be one of those lifelong things that you continue to learn. It's a craft, so you continue to hone your skills, as a person with a trade or a craft.
Which you have. I have to tell the folks in our closing minute, we have the time went so fast with you, as I knew it would. I just want to mention some of these awards, which you really, being head of the New England
NPPA.
is been great, but the Platinum Award for Chasing Perfection, Gold Award for Spirit Caring Campaign, and a Gold Award for the Mystery of the Stolen Ship, which I wanted to talk to you about, but we'll have to do that another time. So we'll look for more of your wonderful work that helps bridge the gap between what is needing to be told and those of us who need to hear it. Thank you so much for being with us on the link, and for all of us at Nutmeg TV, I'm Joanie Sutter. Until the next time.